On the night of October 19, 1942, the waters off Cape Esperance stretched out like a colossal sheet of black glass, terrifyingly still. Not a sliver of moonlight pierced the heavy cloud cover, nor did a single star reflect upon the surface. The horizon had completely vanished, leaving an infinite void where the darkness and the sea became one. The patrol boat PT-48 crept forward, its engines throttled down to a mere whisper that vibrated through the wooden hull like an anxious heartbeat. Lieutenant Robert Lynch kept himself low behind the wheel. At 26, he carried the weight of responsibility for men sometimes older than himself, men who entrusted their lives to his intuition in this absolute dark. Lynch understood the brutal laws of Solomon's. Standing upright meant being silhouetted, and a silhouette meant death. 14 previous patrols had burned this lesson into his instincts. 14 nights of relentless hunting and 14 nights of bitter frustration without a single confirmed kill. Suddenly, a slight movement broke the stillness. 3 long, low shadows glided across the water with the confidence of those intimately familiar with the terrain. These were Japanese Daihatsu-class transport barges. They traveled without lights, hugging the jagged coastline to neutralize Allied radar systems. Each of these barges was a floating treasury, carrying tons of ammunition, fuel, and food for the Japanese forces holding out on Guadalcanal. The name Tokyo Express was more than just a noun. It was an obsession. For Lynch, every barge that slipped through was a death sentence for American soldiers in the deep jungle. But the grim reality was that PT-48 was almost powerless against them. The Mark 8 torpedoes hanging in their racks, massive weapons designed to sink 1,000-ton destroyers, were laughably useless against these small targets. Torpedoes required depth to run, whereas the Japanese barges had an incredibly shallow draft. These 1,000-pound ocean assassins would simply pass beneath the enemy hulls like ghosts, failing to leave even a scratch. Lynch gripped the wheel, feeling a surge of helplessness. The .50 caliber machine guns on his boat could unleash a hailstorm of lead, but against the rigid steel armor of the Japanese barges, they only produced harmless ricochet sparks before vanishing into the night. He had seen too many comrades burn alive or torn apart by enemy counterfire before they could retreat. Amidst the engulfing darkness of Cape Esperance, Lynch understood that without some kind of firepower miracle, their hunts would forever remain journeys into death. In October 1942, the United States Navy was still operating under a tactical manual drafted for large-scale naval engagements on the open ocean, where battleships and destroyers clash head-on. According to that doctrine, PT, patrol torpedo, boats were envisioned as giant killers, carrying Mark 8 torpedoes to take down 1,000-ton vessels. However, in the iron-bottom sound of the Solomons, that heroic theory collided with a humiliating reality. The enemy Robert Lynch and his comrades faced was not a mighty fleet, but small, brooding, and inexpensive armored barges. The Mark 8 torpedoes, each weighing more than a truck and carrying 500 pounds of high explosives, became laughably useless. A simple mathematical certainty became a death sentence. A torpedo required a depth of at least 10 feet to activate and run steadily, while a Japanese barge drew only 5 feet of water. In the darkness, American sailors gnashed their teeth as they watched their most expensive weapons glide beneath the enemy hulls without detonating. They were using sledgehammers to swat flies, and they were missing. When torpedoes failed, PT boats were forced to close the distance to use their .50 caliber machine guns. This was precisely when the tragedy began. Military doctrine held that machine gun fire was sufficient to sweep away wooden landing craft. But the Japanese had adapted faster. They reinforced their barges with thick steel plates, transforming them into compact floating fortresses. When the American .50 caliber rounds struck the steel armor, they produced only harmless sparks and a clattering din before ricocheting into the sea. Meanwhile, The Japanese retaliated with Type 92 heavy machine guns, tearing through thin wooden hulls of boats like PT-48. The cost of clinging to obsolete doctrines was measured in blood and funerals at sea. 6 PT boats had been destroyed, and 17 sailors lay at the bottom of the ocean or were burned alive in hulls filled with aviation gasoline. Commanders of the Tulagi base argued heatedly over tactics, but the reality remained unchanged. The Americans were losing this war of attrition. The Tokyo Express did not need speed. They needed persistence, and American firepower at the time was simply unable to stem the flow of enemy manpower and material. Lynch understood that unless they dared to tear up the outdated tactical manual and find a new weapon, they would soon become the next pieces of wreckage at the bottom of the bay. On the morning of October 20th, 1942, Robert Lynch walked across the scorched, churned-up coral of Henderson Field. The place looked less like a military base and more like a massive scrapyard of broken dreams. Crates from Japanese naval shelling gaped like unhealed wounds, and surrounding them were the remains of dozens of Bell P-39 era Cobras. These aircraft, detested by American pilots for their abysmal high-altitude performance, now lay with wings twisted like bleached bones and fuselages ripped open by shrapnel. Lynch stopped before a mangled wreck. He wasn't looking for souvenirs or standard spare parts. His gaze was fixed on the nose of the P-39. Unlike most fighters of its era, the P-39 was designed around a singular, eccentric weapon, the 37mm Oldsmobile M4 automatic cannon. It was a true beast of firepower, built to tear enemy aircraft apart with a single hit. Its explosive shells, the size of soda cans, packed a destructive punch that no reinforced barge armor could possibly withstand. A crazy idea, completely outside any military regulation, began to take shape in Lynch's mind. He crunched the numbers in his head. 150 rounds per minute, terrifying penetration, and a massive explosive yield. If this cannon could knock a bomber out of the sky, it would undoubtedly shred the armor of the Tokyo Express on the water. But there was a massive hurdle. In naval history, no one had ever thought of stripping a cannon from an aircraft wreck to bolt onto a wooden boat. There were no mounting manuals, no specialized brackets, and most importantly, no official permission. Lynch stood there, staring at the dark cannon protruding from the aircraft's nose, still fully loaded. He knew he was standing on the line between a rebel and a savior. If he failed and damaged the boat, he would face a court-martial. But if he continued to follow obsolete doctrine, he would continue writing condolence letters to the families of his sailors. Lynch did not rush. He carefully counted the wrecks. 23 cannons remained intact, ignored by technicians only interested in engines and radios. To them, they were scrap. To Lynch, they were the key to ending the nightmare of the Japanese barges. As the sun set behind the coconut palms of Tulagi, another battle began right on the deck of PT-48. Commander Calvert had given the green light, but that nod came without any technical support or supplies from the military bureaucracy. Lynch and his sailors had only one thing: desperation transformed into intense creativity. Under the flickering light of flashlights and lanterns, a group of mechanics led by Technical Sergeant James Kuken embarked on an impossible mission. The first challenge was liberating the 37mm cannon from the aircraft wreckage. Hydraulic lines were frozen with corrosion, and bolts were warped by the intense heat of past explosions. The sailors had to use aviation gasoline as a lubricant and improvised crowbars to pry each component loose. Sweat mixed with grease, soaking their uniforms, but no one stopped. By late night, the 280-pound cannon was finally hoisted onto the wooden deck of PT-48. However, a larger problem emerged. The deck was made of thin, flexible wood, never designed to withstand the terrifying recoil of a heavy cannon. If fired as is, the counterforce could rip the boat's structure apart, turning the vessel into a death trap. In the darkness, machinist mate Donald Fry used chalk to sketch a mount designed directly onto the wooden floor. They lacked military-grade steel plates, so they scavenged landing gear struts from abandoned aircraft. The screech of welding machines tore through the night, sparks flying in a surreal display. They welded warped iron bars and crude brackets into a sturdy rotating base. It looked ugly with jagged, rough welds, but it was a product of battlefield intellect. At exactly 2 a.m. on October 21st, the hybrid 37mm cannon was bolted into place. There were no test fires to check durability, and no safety protocols were followed. The sailors loaded the massive magazines into the chamber by hand under the dim beam of flashlights. Not a soul in the crew slept. They stood there, staring at the strange, new weapon proudly protruding toward the sea. They knew that in a few hours, either this cannon would change history, or would explode and send them all to the bottom of the ocean. But on the edge of life and death, they would rather gamble on innovation than remain sitting ducks to the enemy's guns. At 23:55 on the night of October 21st, 1942, PT-48's radar swept four faint blips moving at 8 knots. They were Japanese barges, brooding and silent, creeping into the bay. Lieutenant Robert Lynch ordered a course change to intercept. In the pitch-black darkness, every eye on the boat was fixed on the bow. With a 37mm Beast thrust its barrel forward in anticipation. Gunner Harold Mitchell gripped the controls, his heart drumming against his ribs. He had never fired a weapon like this from the water before. As the range closed at 800 yards, the Japanese detected PT-48's silhouette. Orange tracers from heavy machine guns aboard the barges began to slash through the night, churning the water around the wooden boat. Lynch roared, "Fire!" Mitchell squeezed the trigger. A violent, terrifying detonation, far more powerful than any machine gun they had ever heard, shook the entire sea. The massive recoil caused PT-48 to shudder and stall. The wooden deck groaned under pressure, but the improvised mount made from aircraft landing gear held firm. The first 37mm shell did not bounce off harmlessly. It slammed into the lead barge with devastating force. A secondary explosion erupted as the shell pierced the thin steel armor and ignited the fuel tanks behind it. The barge burst into flames like a colossal torch, illuminating the ink-black waters. Mitchell didn't stop. He loaded the next magazine in a state of high adrenaline. The 8 seconds it took to reload felt like an eternity. The second shot punched through the ammunition hold of the second barge, creating a pillar of fire dozens of meters high, tossing steel fragments and enemy soldiers into the air. In less than 180 seconds, the balance of the battlefield had completely shifted. 2 barges were incinerated, while a third lay crippled and drifting aimlessly. The Japanese, accustomed to bullying PT boats armed only with light machine guns, were now paralyzed with terror by this demonic firepower. Not a single American sailor was injured. Lynch stood on the bridge, watching the flickering fires on the water, knowing their nightmare was over. Those 3 minutes did more than destroy a few barges. They executed an obsolete doctrine and proved that in war, the ingenuity and audacity of soldiers in the field can overcome any enemy advantage. By the morning of October 22nd, 1942, news of PT-48's lightning victory had surged to the Solomon Islands like a tidal wave. Reports of a boat carrying an aircraft cannon captured the attention of every coastal patrol unit. Suddenly, the mangled P-39 wrecks littering Henderson Field were no longer seen as scrap. They became gold mines of firepower. Within weeks, similar surgeries were performed on beaches across the theater. American sailors, following Lynch's lead, transformed the PT fleet into true fire-breathing monsters with 37mm cannons crudely welded to their bows. The psychological impact on the Japanese was devastating. Enemy radio traffic began to overflow with terrified warnings of demon boats. hunters that could obliterate an armored barge with a single shot from a distance. The Tokyo Express supply line, which had once operated with arrogance, was strangled. The resulting losses of food and ammunition left Japanese forces on Guadalcanal in a state of exhaustion, contributing significantly to the eventual Allied victory there. The U.S. Navy, initially strict regarding field modifications, was ultimately forced about a reality. What Robert Lynch and his team of mechanics achieved under the dim glow of flashlights became the foundation for a new weaponry policy. By 1943, shipyards officially integrated the 37mm cannon into the standard production line for all new PT boats. By the war's end, PT forces had destroyed more than 800 enemy vessels, an unthinkable figure had they continued to rely solely on torpedoes that ran too deep. The greatest legacy of Robert Lynch lies not in medals, but in a fundamental shift in military thinking. Innovation does not always come from the polished blueprints of engineers in Washington. Sometimes it is forged in the mud, from wreckage, and from the desperation of those in the line of fire. Lynch and the crew of PT-48 remain the ultimate proof that in the darkest moments, human ingenuity is the most advanced weapon of all. They did not wait for a miracle from General Headquarters. They built one themselves from the fragments of war. The Battle of PT-48 was not merely a local victory in the Solomon waters. It was a pivotal milestone demonstrating the power of field innovation. Its historical significance lies in breaking the stranglehold of obsolete military doctrines, those built on theories detached from the brutal realities of the battlefield. James Lynch and his crew proved that in war, the most powerful weapon is not the most expensive one, but the one most suited to the circumstances. The greatest lesson we can draw is the importance of flexibility and breakthrough thinking. When systems become rigid and old standards no longer protect people, it is individual ingenuity and the courage to change that create a turning point. The legacy of PT-48 reminds us, never wait for a perfect solution from headquarters. Sometimes, the key to success lies right in the wreckage beneath your feet, provided you have the vision to recognize it and the determination to execute it. History is always written by those who dare to think and act differently, like Robert Lynch. Do not let these inspiring stories be covered by the dust of time. If you were impressed by the crazy yet effective creativity of the PT-48 sailors, please like and share this video to honor the intellect of these silent heroes. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications to continue exploring the most dramatic and hidden corners of human history with us. What do you think about Lynch's actions? If you were in his shoes, would you risk everything to change military standards? Leave a comment below and let's discuss. Thank you for joining us on this journey.